Recording and mixing. They obviously go hand in hand, but how hand in hand should they go? Question I get all the time is, Joe, is it okay to mix as I go? Meaning, record a little bit, mix that, record something else, mix that, or should I keep them separate? If you had asked me this question a decade ago, I would have said keep them separate. Do the recording phase, finish the recording phase, then put the recording phase away, and then focus on mixing and then mastering. But that's really not the advice, or it's at least not the advice that I follow currently, because I do a lot of mixing as I go. I can see a case for either, and I want to share with you a reason why you shouldn't mix as you go and a reason why you should, and you can kind of decide which category you fall into. So the idea is simple. I've recorded something, I'm so excited to mix it, I go ahead and start adding some plugins there. So why would I not want to do that? Let's tackle that first. Why would we want to keep things separate? The main reason is if you're not super comfortable with your mixing ability, you're new to mixing, or you've just not gotten to a place where you feel confident, then adding the complexity of learning how to mix onto what's an already complicated process of recording and producing a song can add unnecessary complications, right? You go to record something and then you say, well, let me just put an EQ on there real quick. Next thing you know, it's been 3 hours and you've been just twiddling around with an EQ and a compressor and all sorts of other plugins. You haven't made any improvements, and you certainly haven't made any progress on the recording of the song, right? Because you're only working with a piece of the puzzle. If I record drums and bass and guitar for a song, right? We all show up and we play that. If I spend 3 hours mixing that, knowing that I'm going to add a bunch more guitars and a bunch more parts, vocals and keyboards and everything else, it doesn't make a lot of sense to do heavy mixing when I don't have all the pieces in place, because the mixing decisions that I'm going to make are going to be determined by what else is happening in the mix. If it's just one guitar, I'm going to mix that differently than if it's 7 guitars, right? So we don't want to go down that rabbit trail of mixing as we go if it's going to be a distraction for us. The other reason you don't want to mix as you go is it can be difficult to do this if you're mixing as you go. This, as I scribbled on a piece of paper, stands for get it right at the source, which I talk about ad nauseum, but I will never stop. You can't stop me. We should probably all get a tattoo of this. Let's talk about that. But get it right at the source dictates that I don't want to try to fix a recording problem with a mixing solution. In other words, I want the recording to sound as good as possible, then the mix can sound great. But if the recording is garbage, the mix will sound like polished garbage, and that's not much better, right? So if you're using mixing as a crutch to record something poorly and then make it a little more passable with a few mixing plugins, I would argue you are doing yourself a disservice. You would be better off giving yourself the ultimatum that you can't touch a plugin until everything's done recording, because it will force you to get the recording sounding as good as possible. And that's something that you can absolutely achieve, but you sometimes have to put the mixing away for a minute so that you can just kind of sit in that recording phase and get that stuff right. Okay, so what are the situations where it makes sense to mix as you record? Well, if you're learning how to mix, this is what I do. So if the situation before where Tim and Joel are here, drums and bass, I'm playing guitar, we record a song, I'm going to mix those drums really quickly. I'm going to do like a 60-second drum mix, vocal mix, guitar mix, bass mix, and then that's what I'm going to bounce down and send to everybody in Dropbox so we can all listen to it during the week before the next session. I do that because I'm good at mixing, I can do it quickly, and it just kind of shapes it enough to make it sound close to what it's going to sound like on the finished album. But it doesn't take a lot of time. So that's one reason why I said if you're not confident yet, you don't want to go down that rabbit trail. However, if you do have a little bit of confidence, it can be a great place to just get the things polished a little bit so that you have it closer to the finished result that you're going to want to have in the mix. The other thing that I like about mixing as you go, it becomes a great kind of playground for you to try out new mixing ideas. If I'm working on a song and I'm not done recording yet, but I'm also doing a little bit of mixing there, guess what? There's no pressure for that mix to sound good because the song's not even done. So I think psychologically it helps us to kind of sit back and just kind of relax when it comes to that mix. And maybe you can try that new plugin that you bought or a new technique that you heard about from me or somebody else. And you can try it and mess with it and just mess things up if you want to, because there's no pressure because the song's not even done recording. Now, of course, you have to be careful not to go down rabbit trails and use mixing as a means to procrastinate on the recording, because to me, mixing I feel comfortable doing always. Recording, I've got to be in a certain headspace, right? There's a certain vulnerability to actually performing and recording that this takes a lot more mental energy than this. So I have to be careful not to let the mixing part overshadow the recording. This needs to be great first, and then we get onto this. But the two can cross as long as you kind of keep everybody in their lane, if that makes sense. Okay, so I mentioned about being confident as a mix engineer. If you don't feel that way, if you wouldn't raise your hand and say, yeah, I'm confident, I have a resource for you that I think you would love. It's a mixing course, and it teaches you in depth, step by step, my 5-step mixing process, the way that think about businesses. Most good businesses have systems. So if I go to McDonald's here in Tennessee, or I go to McDonald's in Mississippi where my family lives, I'm going to get the same fries and burger, right? The very similar experience because they have all these systems in place. That's how you get things done. To mix a song without a system is kind of like having a business without a system. You end up just doing things randomly and wasting a lot of time, and then you may or may not have something that sounds good by the end of it. That's frustrating. So instead, you should have a system. If you don't, I'd like you to check out mine. It'll help you kind of take all this stuff that you know about mixing and condense it into a simple, easy to follow process that gets you to the finish line with great results, and you get there very quickly. So if you want to check that out, it's on sale this week. The week this video goes up, this course is on sale. It's already a great deal, but this week it's even discounted further. You can find it over at homestudiocorner.com/mix. That's homestudiocorner.com/mix. Go there now. There's a video that will explain the course and what it will do for you. And with all my courses, there is a 365-day guarantee, like legitimately. Like if today is whatever today's date is, you can fast forward 364 days, send me an email, and get a refund for the course if it wasn't what you wanted it to be. That's how confident I am that it's going to change the way you mix and turn you into this confident mixing beast. That sounds pretty good. All right, go check it out, see if it's for you. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.